The famous speech of Himmler to the high-ranking SS commanders in Posen 1943.
President of Court, this is Dr. Serafim's famous speech.
Yes, this is the speech of Dr. Serafim is based on it to a considerable extent. Incidentally, this was produced as evidence in the Nuremberg trial. You can see it's PS 1919.
President of Court, but there are also other excerpts and other parts.
The speech is extremely extensive and it spreads over several hours. We only took some extracts from it.
President of Court, this is printed.
It is published in its entirety in volume number 29 of the ING, in pages 110 up to 159.
Of course, this is the German edition.
ING is always a German edition.
This is T1288.
So far as the Jews are concerned, Hitler says to the commanders as follows. I have to recall to you here a very serious chapter. I will speak quite clearly. We never spoke about it publicly, but here we must be outspoken. We did not hesitate in 1934 to implement the task entrusted to us, and the colleagues and comrades that blundered were shot against the wall. We didn't speak about it, and we are not going to speak about it again. This was the famous incident of the SA man, in the framework of which Rem and his comrades were killed. We spoke about it secretly. We never actually gave too much publicity to it. Everybody was shocked. Everybody understood, however, that next time, if need be, we should implement a similar task. And now I'm referring to the deportation of Jews and the extermination of the Jewish people. This belongs to men who have to do it. Of course, the Jewish people will be exterminated. This is quite clear to the party, to our party. We know that extermination is our goal. 80 million Germans know that every German has a decent Jew, at least one decent Jew. Germans say that all the Jews are pigs, but at least one is a decent one. Every German has a Jew. Everyone has his foibles. We understand this situation, but among you, there are many who know what it means when 1,000 people are killed, when 500 are killed. It is absolutely impossible for us here to comply with human foibles. This is a very important page in our history. This is a page which had never been written and never will be written, because you know what we have to do here. We know what would happen if we had today in all of the towns we have captured the same Jews who are instigators to rebellion and who are saboteurs. You know what would have happened to the German people. You know how much havoc would have been wrought had those Jews been still alive among the German people. This would be a festering sore, the same as in 1918 and 1920. I gave a strict order that whatever had been taken from the Jews should be transferred to the Reich. This was carried out by the Obergruppenführer Paul. We didn't loot anything. The individuals who transgressed this rule will certainly be published. We didn't loot anything. Now, so far as discipline is concerned, military life is clearly marked by discipline, morning, afternoon, at night. A man has to be obedient. If he is not obedient, he'll be punished. What is more difficult is the problem of discipline with regard to higher officers, either within the party or in the army, or also within the SS. This is the problem which arises. And here I wanted to point out outspokenly and unequivocally that a little man has to obey. This is, of course, common knowledge. But also it is quite clear that all the commanders of the SS, all the Gruppenführers, ought to set a shining example for discipline. But if anyone will think that any order, whatever it may be, is based on the spurious interpretation of a commander or stems from a wrong premise, then it is absolutely clear, and it refers to every one of you, it is a duty incumbent upon anyone to give impression to his opinion with regard to this spurious understanding on the part of his commander. If a man is convinced that the order is distorted, he has to react to it. And at the same time, the commander in question, or the Reichsführer SS, and in most cases this refers to the Gruppenführers or to the Führer himself, who had given that order, will say this order has to be implemented not as it is written, but also within the spirit of it. The person carried out orders.
President of court, not a ruler. As the man in charge,
should act as a faithful representative of the army. If you thought that this is right or not right, then there are two ways to be followed. If somebody believes that he cannot shoulder the responsibility for the implementation of a given order, he has to report thereon quite clearly and frankly. I cannot shoulder that responsibility. I should like to be released from it. Then in most of the cases, an additional order will be issued. In spite of it, you have to carry out this order, or an instruction might be given to the effect that a particular man had lost his balance, his nerves gave way, he is weak, let him be pensioned. This is the other possibility that might loom.
President of court, the plan or the party plan you did not submit, the one mentioned in this document.
The court can examine it. The whole document had been submitted that way, though I only submitted these particular extracts.
The ideology of this National Socialistic Party mentioned
here. No, we haven't
this
submitted it, but as the court is interested in it, we can submit Mein Kampf simply. There is no difficulty whatever in it.
President of court, I refer to the plan, the ideology of the National Socialist Party.
With the court's permission, if I may still dwell on these words, and act accordingly.
President of court, because he mentioned the program drawn up by the National Socialist Party.
According to our program, the first witness on Majdanek is to appear.
You prefer that he be called on Monday, or would you rather have him this morning?
If I may ask the court's permission to sit here until 1:45 instead of 12:30, we can certainly manage. Mr. Yisrael Gutman.
You want to affirm and not to testify under oath, President of Court. Why not under oath and why an affirmation? I can do things only in which I believe wholeheartedly.
Quiet, please. Say, I affirm
that my testimony in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
What is your full name?
My name is Yisrael Gutman,
G-U-T-M-A-N. You are a member of the kibbutz Lavota Machan in Upper Galilee.
Yes, ever since I came.
You can be seated if you so wish, if it's easier for you to give testimony that way. Also in the course of your testimony, you can be seated. You were active in the uprising of the Warsaw ghetto, and after the suppression of the ghetto, you were taken from your bunker wounded.
Yes, I was a member of the underground in the Warsaw ghetto. I came out after this uprising was suppressed in 1943.
What made you leave the bunker?
I was wounded, and I was lying in one of the bunkers, which was taken. There was a doctor there as well. They discovered the bunker and had chlor poison put into the bunker. I did not feel how and when I left the bunker. All those who came out of the bunker were already poisoned with this gas.
And then you were brought to the collection square, the Umschalgplatz in Warsaw.
I was taken through the streets of Warsaw for the last time. I saw Warsaw destroyed. I saw corpses. I saw the ruined houses. And I was taken to the Umschalgplatz. This not for the first time.
A carriage you were standing there, I understand.
Yes, there were carriages in waiting. We were taken onto the carriages immediately and the train moved off.
How many people were you in that transport?
I cannot say, I do not know the figures, but all I can say is that one could not stand in those cars.
Why?
because we were crammed and overcrowded to such an extent that this was one mess of people. And when families lost a member of the family in this crowd, there was no possibility of finding them once again.
Where the train come to?
We thought the train was being taken to Treblinka, but the train reached Majdanek. We were told later by veteran inmates of Majdanek that they could not take in all the victims in Treblinka, and that is why a part of those transportations were sent to Majdanek.
Could you tell the court what happened when you arrived at Majdanek camp?
When we arrived, they were
Who were they?
The SS men. They lined us up in 5 groups of 5, screaming and beating us with their whips. They started to make us run towards the camp. We walked from the railway station in Lublin to the gates of the camp.
How long did it take you to reach the camp from the Lublin station?
I cannot say. When we arrived to the gates of Majdanek, we were told that we may lie down on the grass. We did not know where we were, and we were lying there for hours. Then it was late in the afternoon, it began to become dark already, and then we were taken to the baths. I did not know at the time, I did not believe that this was really a public bath, but the man who shaved my head in this public bath told me that people were spared here, but they cannot say for how long. And when I came out, I could see that many of those who came with me were not there any longer. I did not know that a selection was going on, but after that I went through a number of selections, and after I saw and realized that this was in the classical Nazi style.
Mr. Gutman, where did you live in Majdanek?
Majdanek at the time when we arrived in May 43 was divided into 5 fields.
Fields?
Yes, it was called fields. They were separate fields, and each field was a camp in itself. There were authorities and administration, and the rule was even separate for each field. I was taken to
How
field
is it
number
called
4.
in German?
Feld.
Sade.
Field. This was field number 4. I was told later and learned that this was the worst field at Majdanek. This field was opened when we came. The field was empty until our arrival. We were taken in. The field was constructed in a way that in the middle there was a large roll call ground, a parade ground with huts. Along both sides there were stables, and the stables were where we were
What was
housed.
written on these huts?
They had the inscription, the writing on those tables, that each stable was to include 52 horses. As far as I remember, I cannot be sure 100%, but we were some 800 men to each hut. The hut I was in, hut number 18, there were 22 such huts this field. Only in one field there were already veteran internees. They were there to take us in, to introduce us to this way of life of the camp. A way of life we call the SS regime, a kind and way of life prepared by the SS for human beings.
Mr. Gutman, I understand it's very difficult for you to speak about it, but it will be much easier for us if you could confine yourself to answering my question. There were some stories, as it were, in one hut.
The beds we had were 3 stories, 3 bunks. I can imagine that it was some 80 centimeters wide, the bunk, or maybe 60.
For one person?
This was for one person, formally maybe.
But actually?
When we were there, many transports arrived and they made us share a bunk. Every 2 people had to share one such bunk.
I see. How was work in Majdanek?
The order of the day was we were woken at 4:30 in the morning, every morning, and then there was the roll call. If this went over smoothly, everybody was present. There were any dead or sick, wounded, they were to be dragged from the block and to be placed near those taking part in the roll call so that the number be full, that everybody is present. If the number was correct, everybody was present, work would begin.
What was the work like?
There was no work for us at Majdanek at the time. Therefore, they sought to employ us, to keep us busy. And maybe they considered it work. We would wheel stones from one place to another. We were divided into groups. One group would take the stones in one direction, another group would break them up, and a third group would pave a way with this crushed stone. A lot of those who paved this path, their lot was the best. This had to be done whilst running. They had to hold the crushed stones in the folds of their clothes, and they would search and see if we took enough to carry with us. And this had to be done while we were on the run. This was the work. I did not do this kind of work for a long time. They gave us wooden clogs instead of shoes. There was a strip of cloth 1.5 centimeters wide or 1 centimeter, and this was a treasure. I did not know at the time. One of the first nights of my stay in Majdanek, one of those wooden clogs was stolen, and I had to appear at 4:30 to the roll calls, and it was very cold. I had to stand 1 foot bare. After a few days, I ran a high fever and fainted in the morning. I was dragged by my comrades to the sick roll, and I knew.
What is the meaning of the word Revier?
Revier was what should have been a hospital, but of course we called it in the camp. We called it Revier in the camp.
How long were you there?
I contracted pneumonia in the camp with complications and poison gas. I was not the only one down with this sickness.
What you mean, you're referring to the chloride poisoning?
Yes, the chloride poisoning in the bunker. I was not the only one to be taken ill with the sickness, but very many of those who came with me on the same transport were sick. And generally, all of my acquaintances, my friends, died. I was lucky. A doctor who happened to examine me found splinters of a grenade. He saw the wound under my eye and decided that I was to be given medicine. Jews did not receive medicine at Majdanek. I wish to say that I was told that I was a very lucky man, because until a very short time before I arrived at Majdanek, Jews were not accepted in this hospital. A sick Jew was shot dead. And this liberal system of Jews being admitted to hospital was a new regulation.
Mr. Gutman, when you were in the hospital, did you see people marched into the gas chambers?
Yes, once only. I heard a noise, and he who could stand on his own feet jumped from his bed towards the windows. All this took only a few seconds because we were driven back from the windows and not allowed to look. I saw the march of naked people. I saw amongst them a boy. I do not know how old he was, about 10 years of age. I saw that the boy had in his hand, in his arms, a smaller child. And I saw two SS men, one pointing out to the other the picture and laughing. I want to say that there were such moments when I tried to look into their eyes stealthily, because a direct gaze was too dangerous. I wanted to see in their eyes if there is no expression of a self-struggle, a spark of humanity in those eyes. I always met the same gaze. When we were sad and grieving, they were happy. Whenever they could torture us, they laughed. They were drunk with blood.
When you left the hospital, Mr. Gutman, you were, of course, in a critical physical condition.
Yes. I was told by a Slovakian Jew. The first Jews who came to Majdanek were Jews from Slovakia and Czechoslovakia. When I was there, they said that when they came, they were 10,000. Some 100 or 200
Mr. Gutman,
remained.
please answer the questions. What happened to the others?
The others, or either they died, and when they became weak, they were taken to the gas chambers, they were shot dead, and the Stubendienste, the one in the infirmary, told me that it was preferable that I leave when the temperature came down.
Now tell me, Mr. Gutman, please. You met there Dr. Yitzhak Schiffer, didn't you?
Yes.
This was a well-known Jewish historian. In what condition did you find him?
I saw Yitzhak Schiffer when I came back from hospital.
Could you tell us in a few words what happened?
I saw him sitting near the kitchen, peeling potatoes, rotten potatoes, or beetroot. I came up to him and reminded him that in the ghetto, when I was listening to Torah, which he was reciting to us, and he told me that since he was allowed to sit there near the kitchen to do something whilst he was sitting, because he felt that if he were forced to stand on his feet, this would be his last day.
Were there any latrines in Majdanek?
Yes. This was one of those things of continuous fear. This would begin at night. At Majdanek, there was only one place which was called the latrines. Only one, and the only place where there was water. We had to get up at the sound of the gong and run as fast as we could to be able to come to the latrines before the others, including the prisoners, the veteran prisoners.
Why did you have to run?
Because otherwise they would start torturing the Jews. The non-Jewish prisoners who were held in the camp, and Jews amongst them, were couples in the camp.
Perhaps you'd like to sit down. The court allowed you to be seated. The judge, yes, of course. I told the witness what is important is your testimony and not the position in which you're testifying. You can certainly be seated. They were torturing you then. They were beating you with whips, I understand.
Yes, I did not encounter this treatment in any camp after Majdanek. They had whips with them. They were made of an iron rod of plated leather. This was in the hands of the SS men and the couples. And they would use those whips as often as they could.
Who were these prisoners in Majdanek who were actually in charge of you? Who were the capos?
Most of them were criminals, German. It seems that they were habitual criminals, and because they tortured the prisoners, they were given certain privileges in the camp.
Mr. Gutman, please. I understand that afterwards an announcement was published that those who wanted to leave the place may be transferred to another camp.
No, this was not this was only a rumor that a commission arrived and was trying to get those fit for work. They will be transported to another place where they will be employed.
And you felt that in Majdanek you couldn't hold out any longer?
I felt this, and all those who came with me on those transports felt the same.
Then I understand you volunteered to be transferred to another place.
I did not volunteer. We were not asked. We were called to the roll call naked, and they selected people. But we knew that this was not a selection in the regular meaning, because they really picked out the healthier amongst us, the sturdier ones, who had a little flesh on their bones.
3 times you were not selected, I understand.
I tried to pass this selection 3 times.
And the first time you managed somehow or rather to sneak your way into that
Yes,
group.
during one night I succeeded with one of my friends, and I went into the block from where the people were taken to this camp.
And that transport went to Birkenau, I understand.
This transport came to Auschwitz A, the Stammlager.
You were not in Birkenau, you were in Auschwitz.
Yes, I was at Auschwitz A, as it was known at the time.
I'm not going to ask you questions about Auschwitz, about life in Auschwitz, because you'll have other witnesses testifying thereon. But I should like to ask you a number of questions which we couldn't possibly get from other people. In Auschwitz, there were capos of other category. There were Jews. There were people who were good to the Jews, I understand.
I want to say that there were men who had certain functions, Jews or non-Jews, who were human, and not only that they were human, but they also had connections with the international underground.
There was an underground movement in the Auschwitz, at Auschwitz, I see.
When I arrived, there was a very complicated underground,
did you belong to it?
International underground. I belonged to the Jewish division in the camp. Yes.
He was also among the people who had permanent connection with that underground.
President of court, this was, he was out of the camp.
He was not outside, but he was in such, doing such work that he was going out, and within the framework of his work, he was going out.
This was the witness who was a driver. Attorney General, yes, he was a Volksdeutsche. Judge Halevi, this was a mistake which we regret.
From Chekhanov, there were people who were also members of that clandestine brigade, and in the during the first stages, it dealt with mutual help and with distribution of some bread left, and also with the rescuing of those who were already considered as doomed. There were such possibilities here and there. They were dealing also with the supplying of medicines, because some people knew that when they went to a hospital he would never leave. This brigade was dealing with portioning easier work to people who were on the brink of becoming what was called Muslim at that time. There's a man who was completely washed up physically. But there was also a truly military program which was drawn up by former officers, members of political underground movements, Poles, Germans, sometimes Frenchmen as well. And we had a friend in that restricted military staff who was dealing with the preparation of the program.
Attorney General, since our time is limited, will you please describe briefly, President of Court, Mr. Hausner requested that we hear you today because you come from a distance. Mr. Hausner, we have only a few minutes. Will you please describe as brief as possible? There was a Sonderkommando at Auschwitz, an uprising which succeeded in part. Were you a member of the underground?
I had only an indirect connection with that particular mutiny. One day I was given, together with my friend Yehuda Laufer, who is now an inhabitant of Haifa, we were given an instruction to see to it that we should bring from the place where we were working, namely a tremendous factory, to bring explosives from there. This was extremely difficult because any movement within that factory was forbidden, and in that particular place where they were producing explosives, only Jewish girls were working, and they were under very strict control and supervision. We were trying through the instrumentality of one of our friends to whom we could speak. Her name was Hadassah Zlotnitska. We were trying through her intermediary to influence those girls that they should give us explosives, but we failed. And then a friend of ours was sent to Birkenau, and he was entrusted with the task of convincing our comrade Róża Robota to see to it that the girls give consent to take out the explosions and give them to us. They agreed, and from then almost every day those who brought food had a double tray, and in the tray we had small amounts of explosives which were brought to Auschwitz A. One particular incident occurred when I was standing near my friend. He told me that there was a search going on. He told me that he had no time to put the explosives in the saucers, and that the explosives are on his body in the cigarette packet. And I knew quite well that not only we would be killed as retaliation, but all the underground of Auschwitz was jeopardized. And when they carried out the search, they felt that I was trembling, and they then searched me very thoroughly, and when they didn't find anything, then they didn't really look at my friend. Somehow or other they skipped him. And since I was excited, and I thought I was the one who had explosives and not him. After a certain time, it transpired that Róża Robota is also giving explosives to Birkenau, and these explosives were handed over to Sonderkommando, and this was in the course of the largest transports from Hungary, at the time that we were breathing the smell of death all the time. That we would see the smoke going up from the chimney, the fatal smoke which we knew so well what it was. And after the transports had finished, then they began to use they were beginning to liquidate Sonderkommando because they were the witnesses of what was going on. They were the witnesses of these iniquities, and they were being murdered then. And Sonderkommando informed us that they were going to rise, and we were requested to bolster that uprising. We went to the underground movement telling them that we had tidings from our friends from Birkenau, and who told us that they had to start an uprising because they had no chance of survival. They had their own considerations, of course. They were also connected with outside movements of partisans, and they told us that we had to give them instruction not to do anything because they are jeopardizing everything. But in spite of everything, they did rise. I do not remember the date exactly, but I know that when the matter was examined, it was found out that it was on the 6th of November 1944. They blew up crematorium number 2.
They blew up the crematorium.
Killed some of the SS people and of the kapos. They ran away and scattered in the surrounding area. And as far as I know, none of them remained alive. Immediately an alert was declared. Immediately search parties were sent after them. And I understand that all of them had been killed.
Please now be brief, Mr. Gutman. I understand that there was a special inquiry commission how this mutiny came to be, and as a result from this inquiry commission, Róża Robota was arrested and tortured in a very severe form. I only wish to put questions and request your answers. You were afraid that she might speak and reveal the underground movement. Then she requested through somebody, a messenger, a block Eldester, that Zabludowicz should come to see her, and he did come.
He did come.
She told him, "You have nothing to fear. I shall not speak."
Yes, it was written on a piece of paper. She sent to us that we have nothing to fear, that we should continue our work, that she knows quite well what was in store for her, and that other people are not involved.
And she was killed by hanging.
4 Jewish girls were executed. They were hanged, and the last word Russia uttered, all of them had to stand and see the execution and look. She said that vengeance would come.
You were taken from Auschwitz to Mauthausen until the 18th of January 45. You were taken to Mauthausen.
I was taken into the death march. We were walking. This was in January 1945. We were moving in the direction of Mauthausen.
You came to Mauthausen, and this is where you were liberated.
I was brought to Mauthausen, and there I was liberated.
President of Court, Dr. Savatius, any questions? I have no questions. Judge Revier, no questions. Judge Halevi. Mr. Gutman, when were the gas chambers at Auschwitz and Birkenau blown up?
I know this only by hearsay, only according to rumors spread. I do not know exactly the date, but I believe it happened in the late days of fall 1944. I must only add that we didn't believe it. We, at any rate, the Jews, I personally, at any rate, did not believe it.
Judge Halevi,
but later on it transpired that it was a fact.
Judge Halevi, and they did not execute any more people?
For example, so far as that death march is concerned, I called it death march. These were the remnants of Auschwitz that they decided to evacuate. We wanted really to defend ourselves because we thought that there was no other chance, but the underground movement told us that we had to go and we have to be evacuated because they got news that this was really evacuation and not execution. And on the way, anybody who was weak, anybody who had to sit down for a few minutes was shot at. I wanted to say that that group of ours was going on and answered those who felt weak, and we are virtually dragging them, and we arrived all at Mauthausen, apart from one man who was killed when he tried to save his friends. All of us survived.
President of Court, thank you, Mr. Gutman. You completed your testimony. As I said before, the next session will be on Monday at 10:30. And until 1 o'clock without a break.